Welcome to the discussion. Today we're diving into the complex dynamics of the Gaza war, a conflict with deep historical roots and devastating modern consequences.
I'm really ready to unpack this. What stands out to you as the critical backdrop to this entire crisis?
Well, one of the fundamental layers is the historical migration between 1918 and 1947, which rapidly changed the demographic makeup of Palestine, stirring up long-lasting tensions and territorial disputes. It's like, building a powder keg that eventually exploded.
Right. And that historic tension is so ingrained that even later events, like the revolt in the 1930s, still echo in the present, don't they?
Exactly. Those early conflicts, armed confrontations between Jewish migrants and the indigenous Palestinian communities, laid a fragile, volatile foundation, which then evolved through events like the 2007 Hamas takeover of Gaza.
So the stage was, in many ways, set long before the major escalations we saw starting in 2023, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the blockade imposed by Israel after Hamas took control, which really compounded the socio-economic misery. Think of it like a strangulation of essential resources in Gaza, resulting in extreme food insecurity and widespread poverty.
I remember UNRWA reporting something shocking about poverty and food insecurity rates, didn't they?
Yes, they did. By 2023, over 81% of Gazans were below the international poverty line, and about 63% endured food insecurity. This blockade, intended as a security measure, has been widely criticized as an act of collective punishment.
That's a harsh reality. Jumping ahead a little, what was the immediate trigger that escalated the situation into the full-blown conflict we're seeing?
The catalyst was the unprecedented Operation Al-Aqsa Flood launched by Hamas on October 7, 2023. Imagine, within 20 minutes, about 8,000 rockets and a ground incursion by 3,000 militants. It's like, an explosive surge of violence rolled out with shocking speed.
Yep. That sounds like the kind of shock that completely caught Israel, and probably the world off guard, isn't it?
Exactly. Israel described it as the most severe mass killing of civilians in its history, with comparisons even drawn to tragic historical events. The attack was attributed not only to military objectives, but also, as some sources suggest, to a deep-rooted Palestinian despair over occupation and blockade.
And that failure of imagination on the part of Israeli intelligence really highlights how unexpected such attacks can be.
Right. The intelligence failure is a critical point here. It wasn't merely poor planning, it was a fundamental underestimation of Hamas's operational secrecy and intent, which ultimately set the stage for subsequent events.
So after that explosive start, how did Israel respond? And what were the consequences on the ground?
Israel declared war just a day later and quickly implemented a complete siege on Gaza, cutting off vital supplies, electricity, water, food, fuel, the whole gamut. This led to an immediate catastrophe. Hospitals overwhelmed, civilians starved, and the humanitarian aid pipelines choked.
And this blockade wasn't just on paper. It translated directly into a tragic daily human toll.
Precisely. For instance, the response involved some of the most harrowing episodes, like the Nova Music Festival massacre and the tragic incidents at the Al-Ahli Hospital, where conflicting reports only deepened global confusion and outrage.
Speaking of the hospital, isn't it ironic and, well, disturbing how the violence even targeted or affected places that should be sanctuaries of care?
Absolutely. It's like when tragedies strike places meant for healing. There was that intense international debate over whether the explosion was from an Israeli airstrike or a misfiring rocket, illustrating how information warfare has become as much a battleground as the physical terrain.
Yeah, indeed. And when we talk about humanitarian aid, it seems like every effort was met with bureaucratic and physical obstacles, right?
Exactly. Aid trucks that once flowed in abundance were reduced to a trickle, less than 1/5 of their original numbers. Coupled with prolonged inspections and even looting incidents, humanitarian organizations found themselves in a nearly impossible situation, severely limiting access to millions in need.
It sure sounds like there was a cruel strategic use of starvation as a tool, as some reports suggest.
Yes, allegations emerged that starvation was weaponized, a disturbing tactic where, as one study noted, vast humanitarian needs were deliberately unmet while supplies were allowed to dwindle.
Moving on to the military and diplomatic dimensions. The conflict wasn't isolated to Gaza, correct?
Right. The war's repercussions radiated across the region. You had attacks on shipping routes by Houthi forces, intensified clashes in Lebanon, and even direct exchanges between Iran and Israel. It's like the area became a nexus for proxy conflicts, magnifying the stakes on every side.
With such regional spillover, the diplomatic arena must have been incredibly tense.
Indeed. Many nations recalibrated their ties with Israel, withdrawals of ambassadors and diplomatic shifts from Turkey to South Africa, even officially recognizing Palestine in some cases. There were sweeping global condemnations as well as strong support from allies like the US, the UK, and Germany.
That mix of reactions really highlights the fractured international community, doesn't it?
Yes, and the legal debates further complicated matters. We heard terms like collective punishment, genocide, and apartheid thrown around in advisory opinions from the ICJ and reports from organizations like Amnesty International, all underscoring how polarized interpretations of international law can be.
Right. But isn't it a bit problematic when the same activities get labeled so differently by different observers? It really raises questions on establishing an objective stance in such conflicts.
Exactly. And that divergence in legal labels only intensifies the information war. One side sees these actions as security necessities, while critics view them as systematic abuses that target civilians and violate human rights.
Now, I know the conflict also spurred discussion around emerging technologies. What role did innovations like AI and blockchain play?
Ah, yes, that's a fascinating layer. Emerging tech carved out a role in monitoring conflict zones. AI systems achieved up to 95% accuracy in conflict tracking, and blockchain was eyed to improve aid transparency, delivering around a 25% efficiency gain in tracking relief supplies. It's like, technology provided a glimmer of hope amidst chaos.
That's really interesting, using tech to potentially curb the mismanagement or distortion of aid.
Right. The integration of satellite analytics also helped monitor environmental degradation and infrastructure damage, which were extensive. For instance, some sources mention that nearly 60% of Gaza's farmland was destroyed, contributing to long-term food security issues.
And while technology offers opportunities, it seems the human cost, psychological trauma, economic collapse, and educational disruptions remains enormous.
Absolutely. Reports indicated severe psychological trauma for both Gazans and Israelis, 80% of children in Gaza showing PTSD symptoms and collective trauma well documented among survivors. Economically, Israel faced a 5% GDP contraction, while Gaza's economy nearly collapsed altogether, with 90% of schools damaged, impacting over 600,000 children.
That's a staggering figure. It's clear that the interplay of historical grievances and modern warfare has only compounded the suffering on both sides.
It really is. And when you consider long-term projections, even with potential tech aids, the road to recovery isn't easy. Reconstruction is estimated at about $80 billion, and a two-state solution remains elusive, with nigh persistent mistrust and unresolved grievances.
Yeah, it's a tough nut to crack. And let's not forget, amidst all this, high-stakes diplomatic moves, like Trump's controversial proposal for U.S. control of Gaza, which further complicated the negotiations and stirred international controversy.
Exactly. Proposals like that, which aimed at disarming militants and relocating Palestinians, were vehemently opposed by countries like Jordan and even the Arab League. They, only deepened the divides by highlighting conflicting visions of sovereignty and justice.
I find it interesting, and also frustrating, how even potential solutions seem tainted by political and ideological battles that go way beyond the immediate conflict.
Exactly. And that's why the path forward, projected towards 2035, insists on a balanced approach, leveraging modern technology for accountability, while re-engaging in earnest dialogue to bridge the ideological chasms.
So, In the end, amidst this mire of conflict, legal disputes, and technological hope, it's really about finding fragile ground in a landscape marred by decades of mistrust and suffering.
Precisely. The multifaceted nature of the crisis, historical, humanitarian, legal, and geopolitical, demands that any lasting resolution must address all these layers in a genuinely inclusive dialogue.
Well, today's discussion definitely opened up a lot of complex perspectives. It's a vivid reminder of how deeply entrenched these issues are, and how every event, every tactic carries weight on human lives.
Absolutely. And as difficult as these discussions are, they're essential for understanding such a tragic and nuanced conflict, where every layer is interlinked, with history, politics, and human rights all playing crucial roles.
Right. Thanks for this deep dive. It's been enlightening, yet sobering. And I'm sure our listeners will pause and reflect on the profound consequences and the difficult path to peace that lies ahead.
Thanks for joining in the conversation. Let's hope that, in time, dialogue and the transformative potential of emerging technologies can pave way for genuine resolution and healing.